Coming up in today's newscast, the Tel Aviv Pride Parade draws a record number of tourists to Israel. Israeli aid workers finally land in Guatemala after a volcanic eruption kills dozens. And if you want to lead a healthier lifestyle, it may be time to start taking business advice from Israeli basketball star Omri Casspi. Nearly 250,000 people from near and far have just made this year's Tel Aviv Pride Parade a truly historic celebration. This was the city's 20th Pride Parade, and what started off as a modest gathering for LGBTQ rights back in 1998 has since exploded into the Middle East's single largest festivity for gay equality and free expression. After all, love is love. This year's record-high numbers made Friday quite the party. Things kicked off with a massive parade through Tel Aviv, culminating in an all-out party on the beach. For as far as the eye could see were rainbow flags, colorful costumes, wild banners, and even wilder activities. But one of the day's highlights was undoubtedly a show from Israeli superstar Netta Barzilai herself, mere weeks after clinching the Eurovision title. Over the past several decades, the city of Tel Aviv has blossomed into a beacon of LGBTQ freedom in a part of the world where such freedom is still quite scarce. Strict religious nationalism in Muslim-majority Arab nations, and sometimes even in Israel's own ultra-Orthodox communities, sometimes turns even the topic of homosexuality into taboo. But this weekend's massive gathering is proof that love in all of its forms is the only thing that'll bring us together. Thousands of foreigners flew in just to be in Tel Aviv when the party got started, a day where Jews, Muslims, and Christians all stood proudly shoulder to shoulder.
We're here celebrating ourselves, our bodies, our sexuality, our partnerships. Everything is just, celebrating life.
All right, this weekend, nearly 10,000 Palestinians gathered for fresh protests along the border, leading to violent clashes with the IDF. This unrest, coupled with the ongoing kite bombing of Israeli fields adjacent to the Strip, is evidence that we'll only be seeing more violence as the summer rages on. At this time, at least 4 Palestinians, including 1 minor, have been killed by the IDF in these latest clashes. Though the Israeli army can mostly be seen deploying non-lethal force to control these clashes, at least 100 Palestinians have been injured by gunfire at this time. Israel has consistently defended its actions along the Gaza border, citing the countless attempts by Palestinians to either destroy or overrun the security barrier. But the international community has largely condemned the IDF's conduct. The U.S. recently blocked a resolution at the UN Security Council, which would have officially punished Israel for such action. Following that veto, the Palestinians are now seeking a similar verdict from the UN's General Assembly.
My message to the Palestinian people, I said that of what happened today on the ground, of killing more Palestinian civilians, injuring more of them, is a testimony to the urgency of needing the protection to be provided. And I said we will not relent in our quest to try to find ways to provide protection for the civilian population, because it is our duty, it is the right thing to do, and it is the thing that the Palestinian people, including those in the Gaza Strip and in occupied East Jerusalem, they need.
Resolutions passed at the UN's General Assembly do not carry the same legal burden as those carried at the Security Council. Still, this issue has quickly become a matter of both national security and foreign relations. The Knesset Security Cabinet is meeting today to discuss how this issue can be resolved. Many expect the cabinet to authorize the use of deadly force against Palestinians flying kite bombs over the border. Needless to say, the world is bracing for more bloodshed. Now, speaking of incendiary kites, the Israeli military has shot down hundreds of these devices over the past few weeks using drones and any other methods available. But with tens of thousands of acres already burned to ash and more kites flying over the border daily, many in the government are asking whether it's time to use lethal force. Here with more is former Deputy Chief of Staff and former National Security Advisor to 2 Prime Ministers, Major General Uzi Dayan. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Natasha.
How should Israel be reacting to these kite flyers? What is your take?
Well, these kites actually show the failure of the Hamas. The tunnels doesn't work. The rockets are intercepted, the security fence works, and now there is only kites to make a kind of a terrorism. And we were pretty cool about it. We want to promote our interest and not our emotion. And I'm a farmer. I know how do you feel when you burn your whatever your fields, etc. But you know, basically, kites do not kill. Rockets do.
Right.
So,
well, but still, there does have to be something done, you know, in response to the fires that we see that are breaking out as a result of this. How should the Israel be handling this? And should lethal force be used, as some are suggesting?
Look, we are almost in the middle of June. All the harvest was done, actually. It irritates people. We don't like it. We are furious about it. But the way we react is the right way. But pay attention that now they try to put explosive on the kites. Now, this can kill people. And if this will be the continuation, that's what the Hamas will do, we will be much harder on, on intercepting and preventing those people who are flying these kites.
Well, you know, we're obviously going to have to kind of wait and see how this plays out and hope that these kite attacks diminish. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
After a week of investigations into the June 1st shooting death of Gaza paramedic Ghassan al-Najjar, Israeli army officials have concluded that Najjar was shot at the Gaza border by accident. But now, just 2 days later, Israeli government and military social media accounts have begun to spread a video where Najjar first identifies herself and then admits to willfully being used as a human shield. The only problem here is that the IDF now stands accused of doctoring that video. ILTV's Aaron Porras has more on this story. Now, Aaron, how was the video allegedly doctored?
Well, it's unfortunately not easy to say because the video that the IDF released is clearly cut up from a longer video, but that wasn't the problem. The problem came from the conclusions that the IDF came to and spread in the video, namely that Hamas is convincing young people like Najjar to be human shields and give up their lives, a fact that this video at least doesn't really support. So what you're about to see is the video that the IDF posted, followed by that same soundbite, but unedited as released by the Al Mayadeen News.
أنا المسعفة رزان النجار. أنا هنا على خطوط التماس أشكل درع بشري. أنا المسعفة رزان النجار. أنا هنا على خطوط التماس أشكل درع بشري منقذ لحماية الإصابات داخل خطوط التماس.
Well, it does look like a bit of a leap has been taken in the video, but why? Israel had to have known that the real video would surface, so how could Israel not see this backlash coming? I mean, what does this mean in the long term?
So again, I'm hesitant to draw any conclusions in this story just yet. Something tells me that there's more to it. But the truth is that regardless of intent, the IDF's version of the video is misleading and is fueling the BDS fire in the way that people now have something concrete to point to and say, here, you see the Israeli propaganda. And that unfortunately legitimizes a lot of the other crazy claims that have been made in the past, like how all the Palestinians killed along the border with Gaza over the past 2 months were peaceful protesters, which we know to be false. Not only have these protesters been anything but peaceful, but well over half of those recently killed in Gaza were members of Hamas or other terror groups. Even Hamas confirmed that.
Well, it also seems that it's not just the Palestinian propaganda that was supported, but rather Israel's word and legitimacy that was damaged here, and that's really the problem.
You're right, and some have already come out maintaining that Najjar was still a war criminal as she was seen throwing a gas canister while in her nurse's clothing, but this sort of thing still forces even the staunchest of IDF supporters to second-guess what Israel tells them. And that's the real tragedy, the pseudo-boy-who-cried-wolf scenario, where real major issues, like all the incendiary and explosive kites coming over the border, now may end up being ignored.
Okay, well, I mean, it will be interesting to see, this story as it unfolds and kind of how Israel reacts to this. Thanks for your report. Guatemala is still picking up the pieces after a horrific volcanic eruption ravaged the countryside, killing at least 62 people and displacing over 3,000 more. The Israeli government recently sent about $10,000 worth of aid to help out, but now the Israeli emergency relief team, IsraAid, is putting boots on the ground and sending a team to Guatemala to lend a much-needed hand. Israel's IsraAid has responded to countless disasters over the years, including devastating hurricanes, earthquakes, and more. Its volunteer-based teams are specifically trained for mass casualty events. But the eruption of Guatemala's Volcán de Fuego was a disaster of near-epic proportions. The volcano spewed molten rock and toxic gas across the region, considered to be Central America's worst eruption since 1974. You can even find volcanic ash all the way in Guatemala City, 25 miles from the Fuego. In addition to the lives lost and displaced, the effects of the volcano can be felt by millions all over the country. Roads, bridges, and sometimes even complete villages have been completely engulfed by deadly lava. Many victims were killed in their home, unable to escape in time. Needless to say, IsraAid's help comes at a dire time for Guatemala. The team will join another 45 Guatemalan rescue workers who were actually trained by Israel's Zaka emergency response team a few months ago. Israel considers Guatemala a valued ally. Last month, the country moved its embassy to Jerusalem in a symbolic display of this friendship, the first nation to do so after the United States made the move. The G7 summit, which brings together the world's 7 most advanced economies, is conducted every year with one mission: to improve the world through joint economic policy. Well, it looks like this year's G7 is already going down in infamy. U.S. President Donald Trump has just shocked his allies by pulling out of the summit's joint accord, mere hours after the agreement had apparently been sealed by all parties. ILTV's Brett Allen Smith is here with more on this. Now, Brett, what is the story here?
Well, this year's G7 comes at a pretty interesting time. So lately, things have gotten pretty tense for the U.S. on the issue of international trade. Now, last week, the Trump administration imposed a sweeping number of tariffs on its top allies. But as we, of course, know, the global economy is one big balancing act. So while the summit itself was supposed to address a number of topics, ranging from ending the Syrian crisis, the upcoming summit with North Korea, the fate of the Iran nuclear agreement, America's various trade disputes ended up taking center stage, as you'll see right now in this response from Canadian Prime Minister Trudeau concerning Trump's new tariffs. Take a look.
I told the president that we would be moving forward with retaliatory equivalent tariffs as of July 1st, and he expressed to me that he thought that would be a mistake. And I certainly agree that it's not something that we want to do. We do not want to harm American workers. We do not want to harm trade between Canada and the United States. But the administration's choice to impose illegal and unacceptable tariffs, illegitimate and unacceptable tariffs to Canadian steel workers and auto workers and on the Canadian economy must be met with an equivalent response. I don't want to hurt American workers. They're our neighbors, they're our friends. But my job is to stand up for Canadian workers, Canadian interests, and I will do that without flinching. That's what I explained to the president.
Trudeau's comments reflect an overall anxiety that was very palpable there, right, throughout the summit. And when you see pictures of German Chancellor Merkel, you can almost feel the tension in the room there. Now, even though Israel isn't a member of the Group of Seven, the summit does impact Israel in a big way, right?
Absolutely. And this year especially, I would say, because now that the United States has pulled out of the JCPOA Iran nuclear deal and is reinstating those economic sanctions, there's a big question mark on how that's going to unravel economically. And that's because Trump has threatened to apply new sanctions on countries that do stay in the deal and on those who continue to do business with Iran. And Germany especially has a lot of foreign interests with Iranian businesses. Now, the irony here is that Trump left the summit early, and while he was on Air Force One, tweeted that he was pulling America out of this year's G7 joint accord. That accord included a promise to make sure that Iran never obtains weapons of mass destruction. At the end of the day, these are all just words, of course, but the idea that this trade dispute literally prompted Trump to cancel that exact promise is very telling. Well,
Trump is arriving in Singapore as we speak for a historic summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, and that means the president is literally flying from one critical meeting into the next. Obviously, the world is very anxious to see the outcome here, and thanks for keeping us updated, Brett.
Of course.
Well, the Jewish U.S. celebrity chef Anthony Bourdain, who has long been the host of CNN's food and travel show Parts Unknown, has taken his life over the weekend. What makes this even more devastating is that the tragedy is actually the second high-profile Hollywood suicide this week. At just 55 years old, famous designer Kate Spade also committed suicide, and LTV's Emmanuel Kadosh joins us with some more details.
Thanks, Natasha. This week has obviously been an absolute tragic one on so many levels, and for so many people. We lost two very talented and influential people, both to apparent suicide. Just last Tuesday, fashion designer Kate Spade was found dead in her New York City Park Avenue apartment in what police say was an apparent suicide. She was discovered by her housekeeper at her home in Manhattan's Upper East Side. Kate Spade's husband and brother to comedian David Spade, Andy, said she, quote, sounded happy the night before her suicide, but that she had been seeking help during the last 5 years and taking medications for both depression and anxiety, according to the statement that he released on Wednesday. Spade and her husband actually launched her company back in 1993, and it has since become, such a huge staple in American and international fashion, being sold for $2.4 billion to the company Coach, now known as Tapestry.
Now, it's just so crazy to hear about both of these, these deaths. I grew up in New York City, and Kate Spade has been, like you said, a design staple there for decades. I mean, the brand has something like 140 retail shops across the U.S. and more than 175 shops internationally. So it can be hard to imagine someone with so much success being so unhappy here. But that's the thing. This is not uncommon, especially after what we just saw with Anthony Bourdain.
Right. So many celebrities have come out talking about their memories with her brand and how unique of a designer she was, using crazy colors, very vibrant and interesting designs in her work. But then just 3 short days after that, we unfortunately lost another amazing soul, Anthony Bourdain, best known for his CNN TV show Parts Unknown, like you said. He also committed suicide last Friday in his French hotel room. There's been no clear or exact reasoning for Bourdain's death, which has brought up, crazy international discussions based around the stereotype that celebrities live these fabulous and perfect lives in which somehow they don't get feelings of depression, which is clearly untrue. Hundreds of celebrities who either knew Bourdain or have been fans of his show have come out with statements sending their condolences and sharing what he meant to them as as a TV host.
Well, his death, it hit me particularly hard also because I was so influenced by his work. I've read his books. I'm crazy about his show on CNN. This is a man who has literally taken us around the world through food, and he even made his way to Israel, which was an outstanding episode.
Right. He was actually Jewish. His mother was an editor for the New York Times and came to Israel. He came to Israel in 2013 for an episode that he did for his show. He even put on tefillin by the Western Wall and took a tour of the Old City. I know he's going to be greatly, greatly missed, as well as Kate Spade. I think that people are really, taking the time to understand that mental illness doesn't pick and choose people. It doesn't discriminate against celebrities or their certain lifestyle, or people seem to be living a perfect world. It's a good time to raise awareness.
Obviously, and this is definitely starting conversations. You see a lot of social media posts talking about these issues and posting numbers to contact for those who feel alone or depressed. But obviously this was definitely a tragic week. Thanks for the details, Emmanuel.
To say the least. Thank you.
All right, Israeli NBA star Omri Casspi may have been cut by the Golden State Warriors earlier this year, but that definitely doesn't mean he's out of the game. On top of being a free agent for next year's draft, he's actually getting involved in another game, the world of Israeli startups. Casspi has just invested major dollars into a nutritional startup that analyzes bacteria in your gut and tells you what you need to create the perfect diet.
Israel's NBA baller decided to sink big bucks into the Day 2 startup project after seeing the results for himself. Day 2's system uses stool samples to completely analyze every last microbe in your stomach and compare that to the genetic sequence of all 10 million bacteria in the human gut. As it turns out, different people have completely different bacterium in their systems, which means that people digest and even process the same foods differently. If 2 people were to eat the same apple, it would actually break down in 2 completely different ways. Casspi himself used the Day 2 system only to discover that his dietary needs were quite different than what his nutritionist had prescribed. So he changed up his eating habits and found that the results had given him a completely different feeling, recharging him both on and off the court. The NBA star, who was tragically cut from the Golden State Warriors in April just before the NBA Finals, has invested enough money into Day 2 to expand the company's overseas operations. And the system not only hopes to create personalized uber-healthy diets for athletes, but eventually us regular people too. Incidentally, the technology could also revolutionize how we treat and prevent type 2 diabetes for patients who require stable sugar levels. The company will soon begin clinical trials in both Israel and the United States. A stake in this company isn't quite the same as an NBA championship ring, but honestly, it's pretty close.
Now, Tel Aviv has become known as the startup capital of the world, but Jerusalem is chomping at the White City's heels for that title, especially in the growing field of biotech. Here now with more is the Director General for the Ministry of Jerusalem and Heritage, Ran Yishai. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening.
So let's start off with what is new in the startup world of Jerusalem.
Well, Jerusalem became, in the last few years, she made it to the top 30 of world leading cities in biotech industry. Meaning that she leads Israel, and now it's number 27 in the world. And since the growth is something like 50% in the last couple of years, we expect that in the next coming years, it will hit maybe top 20, maybe top 20, and will lead the world.
That's amazing. Now, what role does the Ministry of Jerusalem and Heritage play in fostering these startups?
We encourage a great deal of this phenomena, of this status of Jerusalem. We have grants that we give companies that to encourage opening biotech companies, especially biotech, not merely high-tech companies. And as I said, it's something like 50% growth. We encourage hiring Jerusalem residents to work in these companies. It's like something like double the grant if you hire a Jerusalem person to work.
Yeah,
exactly.
Well, tell us about some of the startups that you guys have been working with.
Well, we have several examples to this in this regard, mainly but not only. Of course, we enjoy the presence of the Hebrew University and its finest medical school. So it means that we have a lot of biological laboratories and others that really encourage the scene, the arena of biotech companies in Jerusalem. And there is a fund that is to be established, I hope in the near future, with 130 million shekels. For life science, and at least half of it must be spent or invested in Jerusalem. So it means that we really concentrate in making Jerusalem even greater than it is today.
Well, absolutely. I mean, we're seeing a whole movement by the Israeli government also to kind of move more business to Jerusalem and create more of an epicenter of economic development there. And with the new train, that's a big deal, right?
Absolutely.
So, all right. Well, thank you for joining us, Ran, and telling us about this.
Thank you very much.
What does it take to be Israel's richest person? The Jewish state is only 70 years young, but hey, it's still got a few citizens with more money than you could possibly imagine. Real estate mogul Eyal Ofer has held the #1 spot on the country's richest list for a while now. But that all changed when Roman Abramovich, a man worth $12.5 billion, just rolled into town.
Eyal Ofer might own over 100 luxury vessels, but if he wants that top spot back, he might have to sell a few. Ofer's net worth weighs in at an impressive $9.1 billion, but that's still a few billion short of new head honcho Abramovich, owner of the famous Chelsea soccer club. Abramovich made Aliyah less than 2 weeks ago from Russia following a few issues with his British visa. But hey, another billionaire is always welcome. Abramovich's net worth is a staggering $12.5 billion. Let me put that into perspective. It's enough to buy 12.5 million iPhones. The man made his riches in Russian oil after a short stint reselling imported rubber ducks out of his apartment. Talk about a self-made businessman. Ofer, on the other hand, started off in the global shipping biz, though he too knows the hard knocks of self-made business. And it turns out they both know the importance of giving back as well. Between the two of them, they've collectively donated millions of dollars to Jewish and Israeli organizations all over the world. So, hey, first or second place, it's just a number. These givers are both A-OK in my book.
The Hebrew word of the day is brought to you by IDC Samru Ulpan, open to everyone.
And now for our Hebrew word of the day. Well, there's a new #1 richest man in town, and that's why today's word is ashir, which is how you say rich in Hebrew. Come on, guys, money isn't everything, but try telling that to someone who's ashir. Being rich isn't always all it's cracked up to be. But when you're ashir, at least there's no worrying about the rent. It's also probably more enjoyable to cry about your issues in a Ferrari than in an old Honda. But while some people are ashir in money, at the end of the day, I'd rather be ashir in happiness. And that's the #1 thing money can't buy, no matter how ashir you are. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight should be warm and mostly clear with a low of 74 or 23 degrees Celsius. Tomorrow you can expect more of the same with a high of about 82 or 28 degrees Celsius. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.57 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv, and don't forget to follow us on Facebook at Israel English News and on Twitter at ILTV News. I'm Natasha Kirchak, and thanks for watching.